Most people don't struggle because they lack strategy. They struggle because of what's happening inside their own mind. Today's conversation goes beyond success, strategy, and relationships. We are diving into the inner world that shapes it all. Because the way we think, feel, and process finally defines the outcome we create or we desire for. And to explore this, we have with us Rachna Mimani, TEDx speaker, counseling psychologist, founder of PeaceTwogether, and someone who works at the intersection of psychology, leadership, and real human transformation. A warm welcome to Rachna. Hi Rachna. It is a pleasure to have you at the Searching Soulmate podcast and really looking forward to learning a lot from you, learning about your journey and your insights from your consumers, your the founders you help, and I'm sure the viewers are going to benefit much.
Thank you so much, Munmun, for having me here. I think we've been doing this for longest time here and there to be here on the podcast, but I think finally I'm getting a chance to be here, and I'm so very happy to be here. I hope this time that you spend on the podcast becomes worthwhile for all of you all.
I'm sure about it. So to the viewers, this is just the beginning. Do watch till the end, as there are a lot of information and insights you can catch, and it might be of extreme help to you. So Rachna, let's start with your journey. So before you became this TEDx speaker and the person we see at various organizations and events, share a little bit about your life and what motivated you to be here.
I know if I share this, I mean, a lot of people will not believe. I was that one introverted person who would not talk to people, and going out and having a social conversation would be very taxing for me. And even standing in front of this camera and talking was not a very easy job. I think this is something that I evolved into and I learned as I moved ahead, and it's about how passionate towards I was in making my career, and I started doing this. I think I started my journey in 2014, somewhere around that. And I started back with education because before that I was a housewife and a mother of 2 children, taking care of my house. But that's the time when I realized that if I have girls and if girls come back and see their mom staying at home and being very comfortable, this is not something that I'm looking forward to teach them in the new era. And all the stories that's been around them were always very far-fetched. They don't see somebody life. The house culture was all the men were working, all the women were at home taking care of each other, and that's what it was all about. But I wanted to engrave independence. I wanted to have them an opinion, have a point of view in their life. And I think what best could be as a mother if you can actually inculcate and they see this happening in their life. And that's where I chose to become and get into career, and I started to educate myself in 2014. And that's the time when I thought that if I go back to education, I'll become like an atom bomb and I'll blast onto the world and everybody will be there at my doorsteps looking for work. That's not it. That's not it. Education is, I think, 10%, or today, for the matter of fact, it is almost like getting an information about a subject. If you have to do, if you have to succeed and if you have to make a stance, even a move ahead, it's a whole lot of a change on your mental structures, your thought, your belief system, and all of that gets very shaken because the world out there is to challenge every belief that you have.
Absolutely.
I think moving from being a daddy's daughter to being an entrepreneur to being self-dependent, taking self-responsibilities was a huge shift in the mind change. It was so much of dropping off that character that you have, that protected environment. You had to really drop out all of that and face the world with that fearlessness, with that strength, be able to accept no's. I think that is one of the hardest thing in life, क्योंकि इससे पहले तो कोई भी मिलने से मना नहीं करता था क्योंकि किसी को पता था कि कोई आउटकम नहीं है, right? But now when you have to meet people, people will always say, okay, what am I meeting for? What am
Yeah.
I having? What is an objective of meeting? So that makes it very interesting, and that entire journey was very, very learning.
Yeah.
And I think from 2014 to until 2020, I think I did a lot of work on my study, education, and self-understanding, you know.
Yeah.
And that's where my entire concept of the self-mastery came in, because
Yeah.
I think it was whole lot of transformation I went through. And it is like, if I want to give it into an analogy format, it's like a caterpillar turning into a butterfly.
Yeah.
So that's something that you can relate to, and everybody will relate into their lives, because who are you as a person, and when you become a butterfly, and when you go through that, the cocoon phase, and you know, transformation, you really have to work hard, and that's the hardest part, I guess.
I completely agree with you, because in spite of the fact that I started off very early on in my life, just out of college, got into a corporate life, but the transformation was something which I actually worked upon. It didn't happen overnight. That is something which you challenged yourself, I challenged myself, and that's when, at Searching Soulmate, we always say that everything starts with us. That's, soul searching. First, you'll understand yourself, and that's the dimension which I think we can, kind of look forward in this conversation. And I'm sure, listening to your story, many of the people who are going to view this video, they will feel a lot of, courage to step out of that safety zone they consider themselves to be, and kind of step into a unknown world, but something which will make them real and ready to fly, I guess.
Right, absolutely. I hope so. That happens through, and that conversation brings out that flavor for everyone. And yeah,
Now that you are an NLP coach, a counseling psychologist, and also you are also leading many, chapters across the country, where you are kind of training entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, people who've been in the journey, and kind of helping to grow. Tell me something. There's a lot of self delving here. How did you chance upon it yourself that this is it what I want to do? What motivated you to be here?
so I'll take you a little back. I think in my times when I was a housewife, I was always a friend, or a person who was a 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. friend. People would come confide, talk to me, and this happens. So psychology was a subject that I loved, but somehow that business was always a prerogative from the household that you're coming in. And see, the yesteryears when we talk about psychology did not have that much kind of a holding.
True.
You know, they it came in with the stigma that tum paglo ke doctor banoge. That was the
Yeah,
entire
yeah,
stigma
true,
around
true,
the
true,
psychology
true,
field.
agree.
I was somehow not suited for that housewife role, though I still take care of my house, and I'm still managing both my children at this point of time. But the idea was that what more, and the entire identity was a crisis. You know, who are you apart from being somebody's wife, somebody's mother, or the daughter, or the daughter-in-law? So it was a pure identity, like that. Rachna, ye to iski daughter hai, ye iski wife hai, or she's the mother of this. So in that entire thing was actually self-provoking.
Right.
Who am I as a person?
Right.
And I think every year after that, I have looked into myself, that who am I this time? What am I looking at? And what do I do?
Yeah.
And that's the journey, that's the decoding of part by part of going down deeper into finding out your niche. The entire thing was that I fell, I lost money, I learned a lot. I learned a lot, and the amount of practical knowledge today I have, whether it in terms of technology, whether in terms of the businesses that I see, I think it has all been in Hindi अगर उसको बोलते ना कि घाट घाट का पानी पिया मैंने, उस तरीके से this thing has actually happened that way.
This current space you are in, and I'm sure you are doing a fabulous job. Do you see that, when you see a change, does it really make you smile and say, this was the right, journey I chose for myself?
I think somewhere yes. you feel good about the achievements that you've done, and I think I a lot to the people who've taught me in my life, and it begins from my daughters to everybody around me. The idea is, it's just not the smile, it's about being able to celebrate that achievement and to see it in people's eyes around you, the significant people in your life, and that's what is the difference, you know.
True.
That's just very soul fulfilling, that would you say.
Absolutely. So, in many words, it's all about soul searching, being soulful, and staying connected to yourself and to people in your lives. So, today's times have changed. People are digitally connected, yet very, very disconnected. Why do you think this huge, behavioral shift?
I think that there are 2-3 things that create such kind of an emotional disconnect. A, people are not ready to, face their own emotions. They treat vulnerability as going to be something which is a weak point for them. The secondary is that they do not understand that the dynamics today has changed, and the emotions that are there, they are not acknowledging any of it. The third part is there is a fear of failure, or there is a fear of unknown. What if I am seen as an emotional person? Is it going to outplay for me or not? So people don't acknowledge or experience their emotions at all. So that is why there is a disconnect.
What are the most common emotional patterns that you see in urban professionals today?
So the most common emotional pattern that I see in them is A, they are lonely. They are seeking out partners, yet those partners are not in the terms of emotional connect. And the sense of self-responsibility, self-dependence is there, but it is only very limited to the space of self. It is not getting extended to people around them. So they want to have camaraderie, they want to have a growth, a learning spheres, but somewhere they want to do it in the isolation. So these are the few patterns of which are already existing in our people. People have become a very I-centric space, where what is it in for me? Every time, everything that they are doing, they are just trying to find out how it is going to benefit me, how it is going to be valuable for me. There is also a lot of work competition is very high. This competition to be able to survive in that work is very, very high. So there is a disconnect between them and the company, and then there is a disconnect between them and their families. Because the family demands something else, you demand something else, the company has a different prerogative too. So it becomes very difficult for young professionals to address such kind of issues. Sometimes it's okay, sometimes they are not able to cope with it, and sometimes they just falter under those pressures of bad peers. This is also one of the prerogatives that comes in. So it's not many things. So it is just not about having a bad emotional pattern. It's loneliness, it's about being I oriented, finding out right team to work with, and then a lot of people are staying away from home, so that homesickness, not being able to be part of it. And then when they go back to their homes, 2-3 दिन तो बहुत अच्छा लगता है. Then when you stay at a home, there are certain kind of rules and regulations which are like unsaid, and then you need to maintain. And that's what has changed for a lot of people today.
Agreed. Absolutely. In fact, through many of our offline meetups, when we happen to actually meet in person our consumers, something which has always come up is that the kind of space which our platform Searching Soulmate is trying to create, they really look forward to such spaces, because they find their relationships disconnect. In their relationships they find a lot of disconnect. They also feel that हम काम करने के लिए काम करते हैं, and not a lot of people actually feel that they are adding value to the work they are doing. And you rightfully mentioned that for youngsters it's even more challenging, because firstly they do not know themselves well, and finally what they are seeking is something which doesn't really fit them well, so there is a lot of chaos, and that's exactly the space where as a platform we are trying to work around stress, anxiety, burnout, with so much of digital connection, and yet we are finally ending up being lonely in our own small isolated islands, and really not knowing how to have more control on our emotions and be at peace with ourselves. That's the space we work in. And the way you've shared through your own understanding of meeting so many people, I am sure the viewers can actually go back and self introspect. Are you kind of being too focused on yourself? So how does unprocessed emotions show up in our relationships, work life, and decision making, if you can share?
So I'll share it in straight pointers for you, so it becomes easier for people to navigate through them. So in relationship, if there are unprocessed, emotions or any hurt that you've gone through, people generally become silent and they stop questioning, and then there is inherent irritation with each other, which is there because this is very unprocessed. You're not able to come in terms with what has happened and what's going to happen. When it comes to work life, it happens. It could be a sudden outburst of anger, anxiousness, a high level of anxiety comes in, and then suddenly these people becomes withdrawing from situations. So there are a lot of withdrawals that we've seen in people. There are a lot of organizations. If I have to share a case study sometime later, I will definitely share that. So you talk about the work life, this, and what is the
relationships and decision making process.
Decision making. So what actually happens is, when you're trying to decide, decision making is a process where you need a lot of clarity, and your emotions cloud that kind of judgment. Because you are not trying to decide on the objectives or the based of fact. And whether you take any sales funnel or whether you take any sales decisions, you're not selling a product, you sell an emotion.
Right.
So decision making gets very, very largely clouded by the emotions that you happen. So the decisions become very crowded. They become not based out of facts and truth. They become emotional and subjective in that nature, which tend to happen to change, and sometimes it comes from a space of desperation also. True. To meet out that kind of expectations. So that's where the decision making changes the prerogative of the person.
Absolutely. So Rachna, before starting this journey, as I mentioned, I was in corporates for a very long time. So I've been in sales function for quite some time, and I'm sure when I share this insight, a lot of sales people will understand that many times we used to have supervisors who used to make us work extra shifts just for the sake that they didn't want to go back home because they had unhappy relationships in their lives. And I'm not joking, and being young professionals, that is to be really tasking upon us, because that's something not which we were like coming in for. And have, from your experience, why don't you share maybe something, without of course naming that, because I shared something which I really faced.
Right. So yes, there have been instances where people have come into the organization, or where I've gone in for counseling. People have come in and said that the person is making us work because he cannot go back home. And we would want to go back home. Or even the people who were single, they wanted to have their own space. So, and I think last year or day before last year, I think when I was in Mumbai and doing one of the sessions with one of the companies, and it was a very young generation who had come in, and they were finding this generational gap along, because the older generation says putting in work, overtime, putting in that, they came with that kind of a belief कि कुछ भी है हमें काम करना है, and the others must also see, because that's how the hard work is equated. But शायद 10 years earlier, people were not able to do that.
Today, it wasn't possible.
It wasn't possible. Today, these people are possible. They are doing, because they understand that having their life of own is also important, and that prerogative of moving ahead in the journey, and work is not only the entire perspective of life.
Absolutely.
And you need more things in life to do.
Absolutely.
So that's a stark change, and the shift that people are seeing.
Having that soulful connection and connection with your own self makes for a happier, healthier relationship at work with peers, and kind of gives you more clarity around decision making. That's what this question was all about. How to identify hidden emotional burnout while people say, I am absolutely okay. Can you list down maybe 3 of them?
I think this is one of the largest amount of the topics that people come and they don't even understand.
Yeah.
So, you will see those people snapping a lot. They will start snapping at people. That's one of the thing. There might be, anger outbursts. Second, they will be either becoming very quiet. They will be just, to the limited and then. And you will find that person as, abhi to bola tha, abhi to kiya tha. And then these people have played so much of their conversation in their head. They feel that they have communicated a lot, but they will miss out on those instructions, those communications, those many things, because they are involved in their own thinking. And these burnouts also lead to those lot of overthinking spaces. So they will become procrastinating at certain point of time. They might be doing those work, but they will just morally feel like people who are moving around like dead logs, doing things, coming back, cracking a joke and something like that. And the moment they are out of the environment, they will see a gloomy face. They would hardly smile. So these are like spaces where it comes across with high functioning workout as well, burnout.
What is that one emotional mistake which most people do? One very important mistake.
Not accept the emotion. I think many times I have seen people, the mistake that they do is they stay in a denial of many things. They don't accept what they are feeling. If they are going through that breakup, they will say that it's not happened. If they have made a mistake, it is about putting it onto the others, displacing their entire objective, and finding somebody else was the mistake because of it. That self-responsibility and accepting that something has gone wrong or something has gone right for your own self does not happen. So that accepting of emotions is very, very less in people.
So what does clean decision making really look in real life?
So like I mentioned earlier, that if you're making a decision, you need to have clarity. You do not act out of fear. You do not act out of desperation. You are aware of the emotion that is making or letting you make that decision, and you are in control of that emotion. Then only that decision making will appear cleaner, sharper, and more effective.
How can someone start becoming more emotionally aware without becoming overwhelmed?
So one word answer would be self-reflection. And this is a recent part that I've developed, which is called as PARS. And PARS means, it's a short form, an acronym for pause, acknowledge, restore, and reflect, and set down. It's a very simple acronym. Or set down. Set down is basically, it means release or taking an action point. So when I say pause, it means, say, suppose you've got into fight with someone, right? Now your emotions, your anger, everything is heightened, and you have to shift to another call. What would you do? Is take a break, pause yourself, and see what's been happening. And then come down to acknowledge. And then you see what's the acknowledgement required. What are you facing? Name that emotion. And once you have named that emotion, then you either reflect on that emotion, and in case you want to release that emotion, take in 5 breaths. Calm yourself down. You've understood, and now you need to find out how you can release that emotion. For some, it could be playing a game, it could be activity, it could be singing, or it could be simply meditating. There are different ways of physical activities that you can do to release emotions. And then is the set down. Set down is basically, you've gone through and acknowledged and reflected. Now what is the next action item that you're going to do? Are you going to go back to work? If it is work, then what is the next thing that you're going to do? Are you going off to sleep? Then what is the next thing that you're going to do tomorrow? So it has to be an action step. So that's the awareness about the information or the emotion that you have had, and that's the procedure to follow. So it's a very simple procedure. It's called PARS.
And I'm sure that the way you mentioned, even in your personal relationships, many times just pausing, reflecting, and sleeping over it, and then finally deciding what you want to do has a huge impact rather than answering back. In fact, when you were kind of explaining the word, something came to my mind. When I started off my entrepreneurial journey, my first business was kind of hit with COVID, and it was very, very hard financially, emotionally, and of course, just to keep the morale up and run it for 14 long months was really, really struggling for me. So finally, when the second wave was around the corner, I decided to step back. I did exactly what you said. It had broken me, but I decided to sleep over it for the next 3 months, and I really didn't do much. But then I decided to kind of, redirect, rechannelize those, and I think that helped me in kind of in a more clarity filled space, and that guided me to where we are sitting here. And I think it's helpful. So to all of you, do follow it, and kind of put it in the comments as to how you are using it in your daily lives and seeing the benefit. So how do we balance vulnerability without feeling exposed or feeling that we are very weak?
I think it's a word which has been used in a wrong term for longest period of time, and I'll just give you it might be a little longer answer for people, but here is what it's very, very simple. We are trying to make sales decision, and we buy ample number of products, whether it's a skin product, whether it's a health product, whether it's an insurance, or whether it's a service. We do it all in spaces of our vulnerability. And when I actually say this, please always be mindful. You buy a skincare product because it says that your skin is wrong or right, it will improve thereon. So it is hitting onto your certain kind of a vulnerable part of it. When you're going to a gym, they say that okay, you might not be fit, you might get fit. That's the vulnerability space where they let you accept a little bit of a flaw which might exist, might not exist, right? But you are buying something because of that some correction is going to happen.
Okay.
All right, or it is going to value add to what you try to do, right? So vulnerability is not the weakness, it's the strength. And how you use it, it is dependent on absolutely the way you want it. Because if you're vulnerable and you're not acknowledging the emotions in it, you will not seek help, and you will become very tied in your own space, so you'll shell up. But if you're vulnerable and you are aware, which I spoke about earlier, you'll be able to clasp and hold on to the emotions and be that one person who can command the vulnerability to the best of their own opportunity.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right, bang on with the answer, because it just happened that when the last time I had applied for a job was many years back. Of course, now it's been 5 years into business only. So that time when I had scored on a psychometry test around emotional intelligence, it wasn't that great. But when I recently took the similar, kind of test, I realized that self-awareness goes hand in hand with vulnerability, and that is something which you can actually make it your strength and which actually works for you. So to all the viewers, on our platform, many times it just happens that people feel that being vulnerable is a weakness, but please let us just rephrase it. It is your strength, and it's coming from a counseling psychologist, and I'm sure me saying wasn't enough, and now that she is also kind of echoing it, I'm sure that you can understand the importance of being more self-aware, being kind of cognizant of your own situations, of your strength and weaknesses, which can actually enable you for a better quality of life. And that's what the platform stands for. That's what Searching Soulmate does as a social networking platform.